And so if this can happen, it will be a place where a lot of research will take place. People will live in an entirely different kind of thing, and it really will be a model of the 21st century. So we're having a lot of fun and dealing with this whole urban-rural issue. And if you do want to find out more about that, you can focus on the website umorepark.umn.edu, and stay tuned because over the next 6 months, the master plan for this development will be presented to the legislature, to the regions, and there'll be some publicity about it. And there's also a huge amount of gravel, but that's a whole other story, and I don't want to get into it. But I do want to talk about southeast Minnesota, and because, as I mentioned earlier, in some of my early discussions with Dick Broker, who unfortunately died, and so a lot of the things that we were hoping to do didn't happen then, but it's still an opportunity. Which is really to say, what is the regional landscape character of southeast Minnesota, and how do you use it to define region? And the notion of landscape character is a way to kind of, which we use with a lot of the GIS things, is to kind of identify human perceptions of place. The biophysical and the character of the landform and land cover and what its framework is, and resulting in a sense of region that can be spatially defined. And I'll show you some slides of that. And as a basis for defining citizen values and visions for the future. And so when we looked at the southeast area, these are kind of the landscape architect terminologies of regional landscape. A setting unit, which is like Lake Pepin, and a character unit, which is like Lake City or Reed's Landing. It's a spot within the large area. So these are all interrelated, but there's different scales by which you look at things. So we had prepared some early drawings, for instance, just illustrate. Here are 8 counties, and we're right down in here. And just as to what the land cover is. That's one way to kind of define the regional characteristics of the southeast area. And what are the differences over here, which is much more prairie, as you move more and more into the deciduous biome, and then the connection to the Lake Pepin, and of course all of the areas, it changes a great deal. And so topography, and quite dramatically you can really see that. And it was that geography, topography, that made the rains that you had last August so intense, because the water that was coming down through here wasn't just picking from here, but it was a drainage pattern that started way back here. And all of that stuff had to come through. And water can be a very, very powerful thing. So, if you start thinking in the future, what are the ways that the drainage pattern, the watershed, how it should be designed and protected to try to prevent that from ever happening again. But you're not alone. There's a lot of other areas. And, of course, the same thing happens on the other side of the river related to, and that's one of the problems when we talk about rural design, is that there is no boundary. And even here, we're still drawing 8 counties. We stop it on this side of the Mississippi River, but there's a watershed and its connection over to the other side. And so there's a lot of issues that we aren't yet fully comprehending. But here were some of the different nature. I mentioned the more prairie area out here, and the blufflands, and the oak savanna area. So there are these kind of 3 areas of landscape nature that kind of circumvent its way through the area, and it's really understanding them. This is kind of a curiosity. That's a township that's become a city, and I don't know, maybe the name of it, but it's probably one of the biggest land areas of a small town in Minnesota, because here's Houston, and Rush, that's it. But the small town of Rushford is there, but actually it's become a... Yeah. So some of the questions, and I am getting kind of near the end of my presentation, but it is becoming more and more apparent to us as we're working and talking to people that this idea of partnering and planning for the future based on a more of a regional perception rather than county or township or town is some way to try to find a way to look at that from a much broader question or a broader perspective. And so we're really talking about economic development. It's a way of thinking. Can we convert changing demographics to an economic advantage? I mean, retirees moving to rural areas because they like the lifestyle, and they got money. They can, there's a lot of things. What is the quality of life that can be promoted to young people and tourists? Young people in particular, because it's the young people that become the labor force that really drive a lot of the economic engines, and there are companies that locate because there's a labor force there. Can animal agriculture be expanded in all of its different forms, from your small-scale duck farming to dairy? And I think the southeast area is a real problem for any large dairy. But other parts of the state, a large dairy can operate very well. Affordable housing. What economic criteria should regions utilize to ensure a healthy future? We know that it's not the same all over the state. And oftentimes at the state legislature, policies are kind of one size tries to fit everything, and it just doesn't work that way. And so can there be a regional cooperation? Can there be incentives to help promote that? And of course, renewable energy and carbon sequestration is all of these kind of issues. Can this become an economic catalyst? And so can we kind of find ways to connect the dots? Well, now when we do work with in communities, we go through a process, working with a steering committee, preparing background data, having workshops, summarizing, coming back again, and then turning that into a document, which is a living, working document as a work product. And it's really meant to be a tool to be used by decision makers to guide future choices. But it's only as good as the involvement of the stakeholders into the process. But we've done this enough now. We really know how to do this, and it's a process that does work really quite well. Kind of to summarize, population decreasing, and yet the problems of infrastructure support, I think, is a real, in some areas, maybe not so much here, but as I mentioned, up in Stevens County. Economic development is more likely through regional cooperation. McKnight Foundation for 20 years now has been trying to promote that old idea. That's why they established these the McKnight Initiative Foundations throughout the state, is to really try to promote that. Regional land use criteria, again, it's relating to the whole idea of establishing a perspective about how the land is used from a regional perspective rather than a township or a county. Incentives, renewable energy, some of the same things I mentioned before. Tourism. There is a lot of tourism that goes on in some, particularly down in this area, because it is such a wonderful, we call them view sheds. I mean, it's just driving down tonight on Highway 76. I mean, that's an incredibly beautiful drive. I mean, and I think people would want to come from Russia just to be able to see it, or from France, to see what old France used to be like, that kind of thing. A regional sense of place by promoting multi-jurisdictional government and regional cooperation. I think these are ideas that are not that foreign anymore, and because there is a lot of multi-jurisdictional planning that's going on, police powers, fire protection, things like that. But that can go further. That could go into how land is used, maintaining agriculture, helping understand the unique quality of rural life. And again, I'm repeating some of the same things. But here's another interesting idea. Tom Stinson, who is the Minnesota State economist, he's also with the Department of Applied Economics. He put together a paper, and we've had some discussions with him about it. And up in Detroit Lakes, up in Becker County, it's what he calls spatially separate neighborhoods. And it's a way of starting to look at small towns in relationship to an urban larger area as to what is that relationship. The theory being is that if each small town kind of tries to deal with economic development and tourism and affordable housing and all these things by themselves, then they're competing with their neighbor right down the street, and there's nothing that pulls it together.